Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Future of Work track. I'm going to find some stairs to come up. Okay, so I'm your host, John Vill, and I'll be kind of guiding you through the track over the next 2 days. We have a very jam-packed afternoon of some great stuff to share with you. There's a couple of housekeeping things I want to get out front. Firstly, if you haven't already downloaded the Atlassian Summit app, please do it now. We highly recommend you doing so, as it gives you a really solid idea of our agenda and where to go. Also know that adding your talk to the agenda doesn't actually reserve you a spot. So please, if you want to go to a talk, please turn up in good time. There'll also be a survey when we finish this talk via the mobile app, so you can let the speakers know how they've done. Okay, so we're going to kick off the track now with a huge topic: how to create the future of work while you're living it. And our presenter today is Dom Price. So Dom is our work futurist at Atlassian. He's our in-house team doctor. He's helped pioneer our team playbook and has personally run hundreds of sessions on scaling and change with our teams globally and also other teams around the world. He is previously the GM Program Management for a global gaming company and also Director of Deloitte. Dom is a keen traveler. He has visited about 53 countries so far, Dom, right? So he's only got another 142 left to go, so you've got plenty of time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Dom Price.
I've got full-length legs, so I can just stand up here, John, where he's like a small, elderly version of me. How you all doing today? That was really terrible. It's like you had too much lunch and you've got that lull, the dark room, you're just going to have a nap for 40 minutes, and then you'll be like, oh, future, man said something funny. I'm going to share some stuff with you today. The stuff I'm going to share with you, I'm going to try and avoid as many platitudes as possible. And that's because I don't really enjoy them. What I'm going to share with you are insights, because part of my role at Atlassian involves me traveling around the world and not only doing conference talks, but actually going into some of our customers, some of our smallest and largest customers that are going through some level of change, but also have this passion for understanding what the future of work holds. And that's important because most future of work talks actually take one of two paths. There's the utopian path, which apparently says sometime in the future we're all going to be doing 8-hour working weeks and have lots of leisure time. I don't know about you. Is anyone's working week getting shorter right now? No, I didn't think so. So that's the utopian view. The dystopian view is the robots will run the world and we'll all become pets. I don't believe either of those are true. I believe that we own our future. And what I'm going to share with you today are some of the mistakes and some of the opportunities we've got around how we live the future of work today, how we do it now, rather than talking about it and not taking any action. Just as context, and I know you probably know this already, but when I think about the future of work and when you think about how I deliver this, our values are paramount to how I think about the future of work. I'm going to avoid the bullshit because that's a waste of time. I'm going to be open with you because, why not? And also what I'm going to share with you is the whole idea of be the change you seek. If you think about the future of work, instead of waiting for someone else to do it, how can you take action? How can you find the thing that you can do so that you can create your future? And the context that you already know, because we've told you this a few times, is that everything here is baked in the idea of teamwork, the idea of unleashing your team's potential. Now, we've seen this kind of thing work in organizations all around the world, but organizations in varying industries that have one thing in common. Whatever the future of work holds, they're going through a large amount of change. Does anyone, just by show of hands, is anyone working in an organization that's completely static and going through no level of change? Awesome. Just checking I've got the right audience. So we're seeing organizations of all shapes and sizes and all different industries having to reinvent themselves, having to find new ways of working, having to live in the future today. And that's because this idea that we're in Industry 4.0, the cyber-connected fourth industrial revolution. And when we think about this connected world and we think about transformation and change, there's some common themes that I've seen from these organizations around the world of the things that are challenging them. You forget the buzzwords that go around. These are the things that are impacting organizations and people today. The fact there's increased competition. The fact that every single industry now is being disrupted. I think the most recent ones to hit the wave of disruption were financial services and insurance. The fact that not only do your customers expect a faster pace of innovation, but your employees also expect a pace of innovation and a freedom to innovate. They want to do the best work of their life, and they expect you to give them the space and the environment to do that. Your customer expectations, I'm sure, like ours, increase every single day. So how do you delight your customers with a rich experience, often a seamless experience? The fact that mobile phones and technology enable us to be always on, but just because we can be connected 24/7 doesn't mean that we should be connected 24/7. So how do we get the balance and discipline of working and truly understand flexibility? A very popular topic around remote work and flexible workforces. For us at Atlassian, we've always lived in distributed teams. How do you understand what feels like the tax of working with someone from another location? Now here's where we work out how honest we're going to be. Anyone in the room, have you ever met someone on video conference or on a conference call several times and you've really not liked them? And then you meet them in person and you're like, they're actually all right. And it's because there's so many social cues in how we interact that we need to think about distributed teams in a different way that we think about co-located teams that can bump into each other at the water cooler. And then for us also partnerships. How you think about using vendors not as a legal contract, but as a partner to your business so that you can both succeed. And then virtually every customer I speak to and every industry I visit, the war for talent is a common theme. I have yet to meet anyone that hires B and C players. Every organization is only hiring A players, and it's great to see that all those A players made it in here today. So when I travel around the world and speak with these organizations, not only do I talk, I like to turn these big floppy things on the side of my head on, and I like to listen. And I like to try and understand what are the challenges they're going through and what's the difference between success and failure. And the 5 things will be common to you because they're themes that you will see a lot. Growing, transformation. Is anyone going through a transformation right now? Most of you. Tenure, the idea of seniority and experience. Disruption, the buzzword I wish I'd trademarked a few years ago. I could retire right now. And then outputs. How can we get more outputs out of our business? Now, I'm not actually going to talk about these 5 things because I hate these 5 things. These are the things that kill a little bit of me every time I hear them. So the first one we're going to tackle is growing. And the fact that growing is very different to scaling. Scaling gets used an awful lot, but actually what most organizations I've seen do is grow. They get bigger. Getting bigger does not necessarily make you better. And there's a very subtle difference between a scaling organization, which is getting more effective, and a growing organization that is just adding people to the same problem. Because when you add people to the same problem, you very rarely click down and actually ever solve that problem. You just continually hire, higher, and higher to feed the same problem. The subtle difference is purpose. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, you have the option to scale. And it's kind of obvious. Simon Sinek's work on this with his book, Start With Why, has been around for a long time. The challenge is, I think we're in a time of knowledge obesity, a time where we acquire knowledge and do nothing with it. And I'm guilty of this. For my 40th birthday last year, I bought a book on healthy eating and exercise, and I've read both of them. I've done nothing with it. And it's the same for businesses. You can read about purpose, and you can read about this stuff, but turning it into action can be quite difficult. So if you want to be better at scaling and not just grow, here's a few options for you. The first one is a practice from our team playbook. It's called the project poster. Most of our teams, particularly in R&D, our product teams, will use this. It's like a business case, but good. And that's because business cases set a plan which is the one thing that will never actually happen. And then when they set that plan, they get put in a filing cabinet somewhere, never to be viewed again until someone says to the project manager, should we do a post-implementation review? And you're like, has anyone got a copy of the business case? What did we actually promise? Our project posters live and breathe with the team. And it starts with the questions. What are we doing and why are we doing it? But they're not static. As the team listens and learns, as they ship iterations, as they get feedback, they will constantly adjust the project poster to evolve with the team. It's like the band poster. Another example, and we've already heard quite a bit about service desks today, but a great example I saw from a customer in the US last year. They'd actually told me a story about how their IT help desk had stayed the same size whilst the organization around them had doubled. And they'd done that through looking at the tickets that were coming through, using that to educate in advance, using it to do blogs, lunch and learns, morning sessions. They knew the people that would struggle, the people that would jump on self-service, and they were using tickets to actually educate and prevent as well as cure. Now, the great part of this story isn't that. That's a good part of this story. But the best part of the story was when I met the people on that service desk, they all had big, beaming smiles on their faces. Do you know why? Because their work was changing every single day. They were growing into new roles because they were taking away the mundane parts of their tasks and using the service desk to do that, and it would enable them to get job enrichment by doing something different. The problem with growing is that as the organization just hires more people around you, all you get to do is the same job on repeat. Scaling enables you to stop doing something so you can start doing something different. So the next one, transformation. And I know virtually every organization that I speak with is going through some level of digital, agile, or culture transformation. I appreciate that. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. But let's be honest, transformation is very different than evolution. Now, if I'm going to be mean to any of those organizations, I'd say that the majority that I get to speak with, the reason they're going through a transformation is they've been caught with their trousers down. They've relied on heritage, history, and old ways of operating, or they've had big margins in their business, and it wasn't until someone came along and did it better that they reacted. And the reaction was, shit, we need to transform. Transform because we're far behind where our customers expect us to be. In reality, what I think most organizations need to do is transform now, but as soon as that transformation is complete, is to move to a model of evolution. Constant change every single day. The way I'm seeing the best organizations do this is through agility. And please note that is a different word to agile. It is not taking the Agile Manifesto or Agile ways of working and just thrusting them into your organization. It's understanding that the value your organization brings is by being adaptable and having agility in the way you respond to your customers' needs. Now, commonplace to probably most of you in this room is how we've done that in the past through Jira software. And many organizations around the world are following that same pattern of using Jira software. But there's two things I've seen en masse that I want to share with you, because then this can become some kind of confessional. The first thing I've seen en masse is the Agile Compliance Regime. Now, we like acronyms, so we'll call it ACR. The Agile Compliance Regime is alive and well in corporate America, in the UK, and in Australia. It's where a senior executive decides that Agile is the latest thing, because they've read about it online, or they've heard a podcast. They read a bit about it, and then they insist that everyone does it. And you see people marching around the organization. You will do a stand-up, and then you do the retrospective, and then you fill in this page, and then you do this. And you ask them, Are you getting any value? And they're like, no, but we're very compliant. Everyone does exactly as they're told. They've not achieved agility, and they've not understood the philosophy or the spirit of agility. The other thing that's alive and well in some of these regimes, and this is probably even worse, is shorter fall. Shorter fall is a wonderful methodology. It's where you take your long, cumbersome waterfall process and just shrink it to 2-week increments. And it's great because you don't have to change any tooling or practices. Also, you don't get any benefits. But the great news is you can maybe put a blog out somewhere or tell people that you're trying to be evolving, trying to be adaptive. So really, for yourself, for your teams, and for your organization, work out how you can change a little bit every day and actually remove the need for transformation because you adapt your teams and your organization to the environment around you. It's essentially self-awareness. The next thing is tenure. Probably the hardest thing for me to break down. And that's because tenure is very different to initiative. Which is difficult because many organizations, when they're going through change, look to their most senior people, the people with the most amount of experience. I was chatting with a gentleman this morning after a talk about the banking system and financial institutions, and about how many of the senior leaders there have got 30, 40, 50 years experience, and you want to pay homage to that experience. It's invaluable. But if you've got 50 years experience and you're operating today the same way you did 50 years ago, that's probably not valuable. I did a session a few months ago with some executives who were talking me through the way they were leading and changing their business and how important it was to stick to the DNA of their organization. They were sticking to it so much, I had to ask them a provocative question, which was, do you want to be the curator and the tour guide at the museum? Because heritage and history, if you use it for good, will propel you into the future. And if you use it for bad, it basically means you'll be traveling people around the museum talking about what it used to be like. Initiative is about getting the people with the smartest ideas wherever they are in the organization and letting them rise, giving them a voice. And it's not based on time served. It's based on smart, curiosity, creativity. One way that we do that at Atlassian, again, from our team playbook, is the inclusive meetings play. Now, there's two things I absolutely adore about this play. One is it solves a real-world problem that I previously didn't understand. And the reason I didn't understand it is I'm a 6'4" privileged white guy. I've never understood what it was like to be inclusive in a meeting because I always made my point. It was always fine. It was the quiet people that I didn't hear from. Inclusive meetings have enabled me now to understand how do I get the best out of all the people in the room by creating an environment where they feel psychological safety and when they feel respected and like they can contribute like the best version of themselves. The second reason I love this play, and it's another sign that initiative is great, is it was built by some of our graduates as part of a ship it. They hadn't been with the organization that long. I can't even imagine the bravery and boldness it took for some new starters to stand up and say, hey, I think Atlassian could be better at having inclusive meetings. But they did, and they built the play. And the thing about that I love is that our graduates don't know what they don't know. They break down walls because they can't see them. The more tenure you have, the more your blinkers come in. So I've learned from this to actually embrace when we get new starters. And I compare that to many organizations. The organizations that spend months and months trying to hire smart people, and then at some point in their first 90 days, they sit them down and they say, sorry, Mary, that's just not the way we do things around here. And you kill their mojo and innovation for the rest of time. Why hire a smart person and indoctrinate them into your way of working? It makes no sense. One of the ways we do that at Atlassian is we hire for values, and we say to people, we want you to add to our culture. We want you to challenge and provoke and evolve our culture. But let's be honest, there's a reason this is really hard. And it's the traditional org chart that many of us have come to love and hate. We love it because it gives us identity. This is the function I belong to. I'm in marketing, I'm in finance, I'm in IT. And the great thing about that is when you're with those people, they speak a similar language to you, and you're like, these are my people. They're people like me. We can hang, and it's really cool. But we also know that's not the way work gets done. I had the fortune of spending some time last year with Patty McCord from Netflix, who co-wrote their culture deck. And she explained, she's like, if you ever start with a customer problem, you would never, ever draw the org chart. Ever. Because that's not the way work really gets done. It's not the way we like to work. We like to think about cross-functional teams that come together. And we like to think about autonomy. But one of the things I've learned is that there's no such thing as full autonomy. Because in the reality of our world, all of our teams are interconnected. But work should occur laterally across the organization, not up and down the organization. I also had the fortune last year of meeting Dan Pink at South by Southwest, and this was a bit of advice he gave me. One of those annoying bits of advice, because when you hear it, you're like, that makes complete sense. Why didn't I know that already? And he said, argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong. Now, the thing that made that so confronting wasn't just because it was so bleedingly obvious. I realized that as he told me that, I didn't do that. My practice was that I argued like I was right, and I listened like I was right. So whatever you said, I would rationalize as you said it so that it sounded like what I thought I said. So even if there were people in the room disagreeing with me, I was like, I think we've got a consensus there, so we'll proceed, because I'm the loudest. So I win. And we're all on. That's awesome. And so how do you do this? I actually set myself a goal after Dan shared this with me. And the goal I set myself was, I never want to leave a meeting knowing the same things I knew when I went in there. And it was really hard. I'll be honest, it's not easy. Because we've been indoctrinated into thinking, if you're right, just get that point across. Listening like you're wrong involves me sitting there saying, I might be right, but if I listen for those differences of ideas, I am now embracing cognitive diversity. I'm accepting that challenge, and my idea, or this idea, is going to be infinitely better by that collaboration than me doing it by myself. And the reason I've realized this is important is that Atlassian customers don't look and sound like me. Atlassian customers by themselves are diverse. You're all from different backgrounds, different industries, different countries. You have different history and heritage. And so we have to have diversity in the way we work so that our products are then diverse. And you get to see this every day for any of you that use Confluence. We built Confluence with openness at the core, but also to actually bring initiative up to the top. Confluence is a level playing field. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. Once that document is live, we're commenting, we're haggling, right? We're iterating on that document, we're editing, and we're sparring. And I raise this point on purpose. When I joined Atlassian 6 years ago, I fucking hated it. Because I'd never worked in an environment where people collaborated before. I'd worked in environments where people used the word collaboration, but collaboration was a pre-meeting, before the meeting, before the after meeting. And it was PowerPoint decks to get complete agreement on things that you didn't agree with, but for political reasons you had to agree with. So there was no collaboration. There was no feedback loop. There was no commentary. And so when I first had that, it was very confronting. What I realized was that everyone was collaborating to improve the idea, and it wasn't a persecution on me. So the fourth one, disruption, one of my favorite buzzwords of the last ever. Disruptor or disrupted. Now this is a binary view that I have that might be right or might be wrong, but just roll with me on it. If you're not the disruptor, you're being disrupted. I think you're in one of two camps. There is a chance that you can't feel either because it's too early in the flow, but I believe you are firmly in one of these two camps. And if you're the disruptor, either you're the disruptor because you're the brand new company on the block, you're the cool kids, or you're one of the small minority of enterprises that is genuinely reinventing themselves. I actually got to see this firsthand in the last few years with ANZ Bank. For any of you that were in Barcelona with us, we had a customer story on them, and they're actually here this week presenting on how they're going through a transformation which is disrupting from within. But let me give you another example about this, one that you might know about, but one that I want to share a different angle on. Because it's a relatively famous story of Blockbusters versus Netflix. And for those of you that know, in the year 2000, Blockbusters had the chance to buy Netflix for $50 million. That same year, Blockbusters made $800 million from the likes of me and you hiring Gladiator, watching it, thinking it can't be that shit, watching it a second time, and returning it a day late. So Blockbusters made $800 million in late fees. Those late fees required them to do no more work. They didn't produce any more widgets or gadgets. $800 million on the bottom line. Anyone working for a company that would like $800 million for free? Yeah, most of us, just checking. So they had the chance to buy Netflix, and they didn't. And actually, they were one of the first data-driven companies. The data said, don't buy them. The data was pretty clear. Netflix business model at the time was you go on the interweb. For those of us that were old enough to do this in the year 2000, that would involve you dialing up and connecting, that noise. You'd then pick the DVD you wanted to watch, and then you'd patiently wait for it to arrive in the mail. It would arrive, you'd watch it, and you'd return it. A terrible business model made worse by a series of terror attacks in those years, which meant that the postal service was painfully slow. And so this was a tricky business model. So they made the right decision in the year 2000, but roll forward a few years and that decision was very different. Netflix had gone through a number of evolutions in that time. They'd gone from DVD through the post. They'd done DVDs in those like telephone boxes in the mall. They then moved into online streaming. Now they're moving into content generation around the world. But that's not the bit of the story I want you to care about. The bit of the story I want you to care about isn't even that bit. The fact that Netflix have gone on to eclipse Blockbusters because they actually created a brand new business. You can forget all that. There's one thing I want you to remember. Blockbusters invented streaming before Netflix. It was called Total Access, CEO's pet project. They had built a streaming platform before Netflix. In the middle, when those curves were coming down, Blockbusters had the chance to be the disruptor. They had the technology, they had the infrastructure, they had the financial backing, they had way more cash than Netflix, they had more of everything than Netflix. Does anyone know why we're not talking about Total Access today? They killed the project because they couldn't live without late fees. I mean, who'd say no to $800 million, right? They got $800 million of free cash flow every year. You wouldn't say no to that. They were taking a painful part of the customer experience that they'd commoditized and actually commercialized, and they were so addicted to it, they couldn't walk away from that. And the thing is, this is where the incumbent in the industries really struggle, because the incumbent knows all the norms of the industry. They don't actually realize when those norms change. They don't realize when the world around them changes. And so when we think about disruption or disrupted, we wanted to put this disruptive behavior at the center of every team's activities. We wanted to make this a norm for us. The way we've done this is we've got a disruptive brainstorming play. This is brainstorming, which is subtly different than an exercise I've seen in a lot of corporates, which you might be familiar with, which is called blamestorming. It's where you quickly work out whose fault it is. If you've not got the time, it's normally finance or HR. They've got the most lingo. And so this disruptive brainstorming is about how do you diverge and then converge, diverge and then converge, because we know we don't come up with the best ideas up front. The disruptive play forces you to have a cross-functional group of people, a couple of fanboys or fangirls, a couple of advocates, And then those people that you all love to hate working with because they challenge your ideas, like quite negative, the detractors, bring them in. Because it makes for a healthy exercise. They're going to tell you why it won't work, which will force you to think even harder about why it should work. And we've been practicing this in all of our teams, particularly early on when we're going through a spike. When we have a lot of unknowns, the disruptive play is really healthy in understanding what could all the things be to then come back in on what we should do and then go out again. Again, in the Atlassian team playbook and free of charge for you to use. So outputs. I was born and raised in the north of England. I graduated from Sheffield University in the year 2000. I was taught about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Taylorism, the optimal size of a shovel in 1920s Pennsylvania steel. It got me a good grade at university, and it got me a business commerce degree. And it taught me about input, process, output. That's how the business world worked. You either improved your inputs or you could improve your process, and that would give you better outputs. And sadly, whilst that got me a good grade, for the 19 years I've been in the workforce, I have never used that. I have never needed to optimize the size of a shovel for shifting coal. Instead, I believe we're in a world where instead of focusing on outputs, we need to realize that what we really should be doing is focusing on outcomes. Now, most people I share this with agree. They're like, yeah, that makes complete sense, Dom, like outcomes. I'm outcome driven. I'm all about outcome driven. But this isn't easy. We had a situation in Atlassian with a team I was working with last year. Every time they shipped on a Friday, they'd get the pizza, they'd get the beers, high fives all around, and they'd celebrate. So much so that they got addicted to the celebration and they shipped every Friday, regardless. And I said to them one day, what's your measure of success? And then, pizza in the mouth and half a lager in the hand. And they're like, well, we shipped. And I'm like, no, I meant like for the customer. And they're like, customer. Not sure. We'll do that next quarter. We'll definitely look at that next quarter. And we just got addicted to outputs. And the reason I tell you that is it's very easy to do. Outputs are immediate gratification, and they happen today. They happen right now. You know if you're measuring or guided by outputs, if you get to the end of the week and your partner or your dog or your cocktail says to you, how's your week? And you're like, busy. Workshop busy, but I'm in a guild and a tribe and a cohort. I'm on a steering committee and a program and an initiative, and I'm looking after some big bets. So I'm really busy. And you're like, oh, were you effective? And you're like, yeah, but busy, mainly busy, right? You're just doing stuff. Outcomes are where you know you've had some impact. Now, the reality of this, I came to learn in all of my jobs. I spent a good amount of time with Deloitte and then a few organizations since. And I came across the phenomena of watermelon status. This is where all your projects are green on the outside, but red on the inside. They're the projects that when the status update comes through, it's green, 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 and then just before it's due to ship, it goes red by 6 months. And you want to grab the project manager and go, how did we lose 6 months in a day? And you didn't. It's just that they were promising green, green, green because they were hopeful. What they weren't doing was really looking at the impact and the outcomes. The way we've managed that at Atlassian was the hard way. We used to have a scoring system for our KPIs, and we didn't really realize it at the time, but it's quite punitive. If you did well, you didn't hear from anyone. And if you did badly, you got pulled over the coals. It was a very progressive approach to KPIs. And about 2 years ago, we changed to OKRs. For those that aren't familiar, objective key results. Actually based off a Google framework, but used in many organizations around the world. Now, the great thing about OKRs is they center you on the objective. In fact, some of the teams that I've been working with, they phrase their objectives in the words of the customer they would be delivering to. Because that's the real objective, that's the real person that you want to impact. That's the outcome you're trying to achieve. The key results, they're the things you're going to do to make progress. Not a set of tasks, but what are the meaningful things that we're going to do to give us confidence we're making progress over time? And the important thing here is nowhere on here is the word perfection. This is not about building a plan and delivering it regardless. It's about having a strong outcome or objective in mind and then working towards it whilst accepting that as you work towards it, you'll learn a shitload more. And as you learn, you course correct. It's true agility. The way we do it at Atlassian is we actually, the first time we rolled this out, did it completely wrong. We had our company level strategy using one set of terminology, and then we gave OKRs to our teams. It was very painful. There was no connection between the two. And we changed that this last financial year. Not only did we release our company strategy internally using the OKR framework, but Scott and Mike did a town hall to every member of staff, split in half. The first half of the town hall was on what are our objectives and what are our key results. Seems completely natural. The second half was popular misconceptions of the work you might think we're doing that we're no longer doing. And it was fascinating the number of conversations I had with people afterwards where they're like, even though that the project I'm working on, even though that wasn't in there, I've been working on it for a few years now, so I thought I was going to just continue. But it turns out we're not investing in that thing anymore, so maybe I might stop. And I'm like, yeah, if you don't, that's called a hobby, and you don't get paid for your hobbies. You do those free of charge in your own time. And so what this gave us the chance to do, not just give our teams purpose and clarity on our direction, but also give them meaningful ways of measuring their progress and meaningful ways of stopping old work that was no longer valuable. The other thing this gave us a chance to do was to take that wonderful system of business as usual, or for any technologists in the room, keeping the lights on, and saying, what does that mean? Because keeping the lights on isn't a job. So what does that actually mean? A whole lot of our infrastructure teams came back after we rolled out OKRs and like, well, actually, we can adopt OKRs because our OKRs are more uptime or reduced cost, or doing this more efficiently using optimization and using automation, therefore freeing our people up to do complex work. We suddenly realized there was no such thing as constant BAU or keeping the lights on. That was just your way of getting a little bit slow and complacent. So now we challenge all of our work to make sure that we're achieving those objectives. Again, we have Confluence templates that enable you to do this, that we've shipped in the marketplace, and there's an OKR play in the team playbook, as well as a few blogs around how we think about that. So the 5 things that we've spoken about: growing, transformation, tenure, disruption, and outputs. And how you go about changing your way of thinking into scaling, into thinking about evolving every single day in small changes, into driving initiative and giving everyone in your organization a voice because they're smart, curious, creative people, around being the active disruptor and not letting the history and heritage of your industry get in the way, and genuinely driving outcomes that give positive impact to your internal customers and your external customers, which is way more engaging as a workforce than being measured on outputs. So that's all well and good, but how do you get there? What do you need to do? My biggest suggestion is actually around unlearning, which is a concept of saying we're all full. Our brains are full, our cognitive load is full, we have no more hours in the week or in the day. And so unless you want to give more and more hours to work, you have to unlearn old habits and old rituals. And the reason this is the case is back when I graduated from Sheffield University in the year 2000, I was taught that the world was all about efficiency. In fact, if you go through any airport lounge, most management books still talk about efficiency. And efficiency for me is about doing the same thing faster. And there's always time for that. But actually there's time right now in this fast pace of change, in Industry 4.0 and the cyber-connected world, to have some focus on effectiveness. Now, the smart people in the room know that you need to be efficient and effective. All right? I'm not going to suggest that if you go fully effective, everything's going to be wonderful. But the reality is most organizations are heavily baked on efficiency. So my suggestion to you is swing the pendulum hard over to effective, because the natural system of your organization will swing it back. Effectiveness for us is why we've got something like the playbook, suggestive plays of how you might want to work, rather than procedures or policy or 10-step processes of how work should be done. If you hire smart people, give them the guardrails to do their best work. Don't tell them what to do. If you're going to tell people what to do, just hire monkeys. We actually push decisions across the organization. Decisions get made by the person who's the best person to make that decision, which is rarely anything to do with the organization chart. I had an example last week where I was working with Scott Farquhar on something, and I was like, what do you think we should do? And he's like, you're the best person to make this decision. What do you want to do? And I'm like, wow, you're the boss, so you tell me and I'll agree. And he's like, no, you're the best person. You make the decision. So I told him, he didn't like it, and he went along with it. Because he's like, you know this better than me. The org chart is not important here. The hierarchy should not be the tool for decision making. For us, this is all around getting those decisions out there, getting the empowerment and the autonomy, and making sure that we give our teams the freedom to build their own rhythm and cadence, because when they do that, they build a rhythm and cadence that is optimized for their environment, not mine. So when you think about how we get there, often what happens at this stage is people are sort of going, it's like a HR person probably, or maybe we'll hire a head of transformation or head of evolution, better word. It's got to be someone's job, and the answer is it's your job. You're a role model to many people in your organization, whether you choose it or not, and you probably don't realize the number of people you're a role model to. But if you want to do the right things around initiative, around outcomes, around having an organization and team that evolves every single day, the challenge is very simple. You have to lead by example, and you have to be adaptive to your environment and demonstrate agility, demonstrate the willingness to create an environment where everyone gets to share their views, the willingness to be wrong, and the willingness to drive meaningful outcomes, not only for your teams and your organization, but for your customers. So thank you very much for your time.